أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا اللهم وهب لنا رأفته ورحمته ودعاه وخيره حتى نستكمل بك الكرامة عند الله برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين وصل اللهم على محمد وآله الطاهرين. For the hastening of the reappearance of the Master, the Savior, the Avenger, God's proof, Al-Hujjat ibn al-Hasan al-Askari, recite aloud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Imam al-Husain received many individuals who advised him against going to Iraq. Those included people like Abdullah ibn Umar ibn al-Khattab. They included people like Abdullah ibn al-Abbas, Imam Husain's cousin. And they also included people very close to the Imam, like his own brother, Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah, among others, who all said the same thing, which is that we know the people of Kufa to be treasonous and treacherous. We know that they won't fulfill their obligations, their commitments that they've made to you. Yes, they've sent 16,000 letters, bag full of letters, where they've invited the Imam to come to Kufa so that they could support him, they could help him revolt against the government of Yazid ibn Muawiyah, but they won't keep their promise. They won't stay true to their word. They've all said this in one way or another to Imam al-Husain alayhi salam. The Imam responded to each of them in his own way. But then he made a declaration. Listen carefully. Tonight is a very special night. We're getting closer and closer to the 11th hour, to the day of Ashura. If any of us here tonight or watching this is lagging behind, if we happen to feel this shake in our resolve, if we're not serious, then there's not much time left. Listen to what the Imam said upon leaving the holy city of Mecca towards Kufa. Now, also try and understand the context of the sermon of Imam al-Husain, because Hajj, which is one of the pillars of this faith, is being broken. Imam al-Husain was meant, as far as the pilgrims are concerned, was meant to perform the pilgrimage to the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And yet, Imam al-Husain decides to stop the pilgrimage, to leave the city of Mecca in the middle of Hajj. But before he did that, the Imam gave this sermon in which he said, and I quote, he said, لَقَدْ خُطَّ الْمَوْتُ عَلَى وُلْدِ آدَمَ مَخَطَّ الْقِلَادَةِ عَلَى جِيدِ الْفَتَاةِ. Death has been written for the children of Adam the way a necklace surrounds the neck of a bachelorette. What this means, we might get a chance to discuss it in the upcoming nights. Because my focus is on another part of the sermon of Imam al-Husain. Why the Imam describes death as a necklace that beautifies the neck of a young girl. Of all the different descriptions the Imam could have provided, he uses this. We might get a chance to explain this later on, inshallah, in the upcoming nights. But then the Imam says, he says, وَخُيَّرَ لِي مَصْرَعٌ أَنَا لَاقِيهِ. I have been given the choice of a final departure from this world. I am going to die. Now, why is the Imam saying this? Because everybody was warning the Imam about how he might get killed, that he's putting himself in harm's way, that he's risking his life. So the Imam is telling them, I know better than all of you that death is coming. That's why he begins the sermon by talking about death. And then he says, this isn't just about death in general. I am going to face my death. وَخُيِّرَ لِي مَصْرَعٌ أَنَا لَاقِيهِ. Then he says, وَمَا أَشْوَقَنِي إِلَىٰ أَسْلَافِي اشْتِيَاقَ يَعْقُوبَ إِلَىٰ يُوسُفَ. He says, and you should know that I am so eager to meet my predecessors, my ancestors, my grandfather, my father, my mother, my brother. The way Yaqub yearned and longed to meet his son Yusuf. That's how much I'm eager. So don't try and scare me away with talking about death, about how I'm putting myself in harm's way. I couldn't be more eager than to meet my ancestors, my predecessors. Then he says, and this is the focus of my talk tonight, he says, كأني بأوصالي تقطعها or يتقطعها عسلان الفلوات بين النواويس وكربلاء فيملأن مني أجوافا كربا وأشربة صغبة. He says, I can see. You know how when something's about to happen and you know exactly what's going to happen, it's almost as though you can see it. The Imam says, it's as if my limbs, my joints, my filaments will be torn up by the wolves of the desert. كأني بأوصالي. Awsal is a reference to the joints that keep the skeleton together. I can see how Uslanul Falawat, which is a reference to the beasts and wolves that dwell in the desert. These are wild beasts. These are vicious animals. Have you ever seen those wildlife videos where when these hyenas or these wolves, they catch their prey, how they bite on their prey and then they shake themselves so that they could take a bite off of their prey? This is Uslanul Falawat. بأبي أنت وأمي يا أبا عبد الله. He says, I can see how these wild beasts will tear apart my limbs, my joints. Then he says, فَيَمْلَأْنَ مِنِّي أَكْرَاشًا, and they will fill their stomachs, their empty stomachs with my limbs. وَأَجْرِبَةً صُغْبًا. Ajriba is a reference to these bags that you would put, for instance, bread in them. The Imam describes these bags, these vessels, he describes them as hungry bags. He says they will fill these bags and their stomachs with my limbs, with my body parts. Then the Imam says other things which I don't want to talk about tonight. I want to focus on this description that the Imam provides for his death and his martyrdom. Now, the part about him being torn apart, the part about him being dismembered, may my life and everything I have be ransomed even for a single drop of his blessed blood. That part we can kind of understand. Because they did to the sacred figure of Abu Abdullah al-Husain unspeakable things. Things I can't just mention casually in the middle of a majalis. Things that you could probably just give glimpses about during the maqtal that's recited on the day of Ashura. Unspeakable, heinous things that you might know just a tiny bit about. That part we understand. But the part about filling empty stomachs and hungry vessels with the joints and limbs and the body of Imam al-Husain, what's that all about? Despite the atrocious and heinous things they did to the sacred figure of the Imam, we know that no cannibalism was involved. Nobody actually took a bite off the body of the Imam like Hind, the mother of Muawiyah, the grandmother of Yazid, did to the body of Hamza ibn Abdul Muttalib. That didn't happen on the day of Ashura. So clearly, what the Imam is describing here is figurative. It's a metaphor. It's not literal. So what is he talking about? In Arabic, as well as other languages, you might say that so-and-so أكل بيت فلان, that he left his home unprotected, unguarded, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, places where there is no rule of law. He left his home. When he came back, he noticed that the house had been eaten by such and such. Again, this is figurative, it's not literal. The house being eaten means what? Means it was stolen. It means it was confiscated. It means it was taken forcefully by someone, sold off, the money used to fund somebody's lifestyle, right? That's what we mean when we say this was eaten, figuratively speaking. So what is the Imam talking about here? His limbs, his body parts being eaten, stomachs being filled, bags being filled. What is he referring to? Let me give you a few examples to illustrate and to help understand so that we can avoid falling into this trap. وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. The trap of being among the manifestations of the people who eat the limbs and body of Imam al-Husain, who cannibalize the sacred figure of the granddaughter of Rasulullah. What it actually means is when we compromise on the blood of Imam al-Husain for personal gain. That's basically what the Imam is referring to. But let's give some examples. Amir al-Mu'mineen used to say, أما السب فسبوني وأما البراءة فلا تتبرؤوا مني. There was a time when, in order for you to survive, so that you wouldn't be killed, you had to curse Amir al-Mu'mineen. You don't have to go all the way back to the era of Muawiyah and the Umayyads and the Abbasids. No, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago in Iraq, this was common practice. They would put up a false checkpoint, members of ISIS, using military swag that was used by the Iraqi army, and they would wave cars to stop. When the cars stopped, they would go up to the bus, or they'd go to the car, and they would say, "We'd like to see identification papers." They would pick out people based on their names. If your name was Hassan, Husain, Ja'far, Abbas, right? They would immediately identify you as a Shia. They would pull you out and they would execute you by the side of the road. This happened more times than we could count. Again, this is in our lifetime. And so this was something that was practiced from the time of the oppressive caliphs all the way to the 21st century. And God knows whether there's ever going to be an end to this vitriol, to this blind hatred towards the Ahlul Bayt and by extension towards their followers. We don't know. It probably will never stop. And so in order for you to survive, you would be given the choice of either cursing Amirul Mu'mineen or dying or getting killed. Again, this happened in Iraq over and over again. So they would say, here's a picture of the shrine of Ali ibn Abi Talib, spit on this. Or curse the Imam. Okay? Now, Amirul Mu'mineen gave a license to his followers such that in order for them to preserve their lives, he said, you can curse me. If you find yourself in that situation, I allow you to curse Ali ibn Abi Talib. You might think to yourself, I'd never do that. I would die before I ever hurl an insult towards my master, Amirul Mu'mineen. But you'd be wrong. Because the Imam not only gave us a license to do that, the Ahlul Bayt have instructed us specifically to preserve our lives and practice what we refer to as Taqiyya, dissimulation. In other words, Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam says, I know we're kind of branching off a little bit, but these are crucial subjects that we need to touch on. Imam as-Sadiq says, At-Taqiyyatu dini wa dinu abai. If someone does not practice taqiyya, he or she has no religion. Why? Because taqiyya and dissimulation and the preservation of the lives of the Shia, even at the expense of cursing Ali ibn Abi Talib, is my religion, the Imam says, and the religion of my forefathers. In other words, sometimes it's not a choice that you get to make. You must practice taqiyya. Especially when the matter involves other believers. Especially when exposing the truth as it really is puts others in harm's way. You have no choice here. No, I want to speak the truth. You can't. Because speaking the truth spills Shia blood. Speaking the truth here means that others will be killed or harmed. Or even if it's just insulted, you have no right. At-Taqiyyatu dini wa dinu abai. I can't just say, oh, but everybody now is speaking about their religion freely, so I get to do the same thing. No, you don't. No, you don't. Everybody's making movies about their religion. Why is it that only the Shia can't do that? Well, because the Shia have scholars, they have imams, they have leaders who have specifically told them to practice taqiyya. At-Taqiyyatu dini wa dinu abai. It's not up to you. Look at the practice of our maraja'. Look at our ulama. Look at the jurists of this faith. The jurists are who? They're experts in the Holy Quran and the teachings of the Prophet and the Ahlul Bayt. They're the experts who tell you what's right and what's wrong, what's halal and what's haram. That's why they're called fuqaha. You have to consult them. Just because I happen to be an overly zealous Shia who wants to go out there and challenge the whole world, it's not up to you. I can sit on the pulpit and say whatever I want. No, you don't. It's not up to you. Especially when the only time you're actually doing that is when you're safe. If I was in harm's way, if my life was in danger, I wouldn't do this. I'll only say it when I can ensure my own safety and the safety of my family. When I have the protection of some Western government, knowing that no one's going to do anything stupid in this part of the world, that's when I feel safe enough to talk about this. Putting others in harm's way. What hypocrisy is this? If you're serious, if you're brave enough, go out there in Kabul and say these things. Go out there in A'zamiyya and Baghdad and say these things. Taqiyya dini wa dinu abai. And the Imam here tells us you can even curse me. Imagine. Then he says, and I'll get back to the question of taqiyya in a little bit. أَمَّا الْبَرَاءَ فَلَا تَتَبَرَّأُوا مِنِّي. As for disassociating from me, don't do that. But you might say, isn't cursing a form of disassociation? Of course it is, right? So what's the distinction between these two? What's the difference when the Imam says you can curse me but you can't disassociate? What does that mean? Listen carefully. Again, this applies to all of us. You and I could very well fall into this trap. Disassociation is different from cursing in this way. There were tyrants who would pull a Shia aside and say, curse Ali ibn Abi Talib. If he cursed the Imam, they would let him go. But there were tyrants like Muawiyah, and they're not content with just hearing someone curse Ali ibn Abi Talib. You see, this is why someone like, again, this might be a question that pops in your head. If taqiyya is so critical, if we must observe the rules concerning dissimulation for the preservation of Shia life is so important, what about Metham al-Tamar? What about Hujr ibn Adi? What about Kumayl ibn Ziyad? What about all of these people? Shouldn't they have practiced taqiyya? Why did they do things so that they get killed or crucified or beheaded? Didn't they know about taqiyya? Because this is one of the tricks used by those who try to exploit taqiyya. They tell you, well, we have these people and they're our heroes, and look at them. They abandoned taqiyya because that's how it's supposed to be. The answer is very simple. Muawiyah and Yazid and other tyrants like them, they were way ahead of the curve. They weren't naive enough to simply hear someone curse Amir al-Mu'mineen and they'd be like, okay, thank you very much. We accept your allegiance. You're a good man from now on. That's not how it worked. They expected these individuals to disassociate from Amir al-Mu'mineen. And disassociation in this case was to completely abandon Amir al-Mu'mineen and allegiance to him in your practical everyday life. It wasn't just about a curse. It was about making sure that we observe you 24/7 and see how you live your life. And if there is the slightest connection to Ali ibn Abi Talib, you're exposed. They weren't content with just a curse, an insult to Amir al-Mu'mineen. You see the difference? He says, don't disassociate. أَمَّا الْبَرَاءَ فَلَا تَتَبَرَّأُوا مِنِّي لِأَنِّي وُلِدْتُ عَلَى الْفِطْرَةِ. Let me give you an example to illustrate. Did you know Egypt was a Shia country? Yes, the Fatimids who invaded Egypt, who led the Fatimid government there for a lengthy period of time, they were Ismaili Shia, meaning they only believed in 6 Imams, up to Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, and then they branched off, they broke off. But they were Shia, a type of Shia. And Egypt was a Shia country. Al-Azhar was established by Shia clergy. What happened to Egypt? Why is it a Sunni country now? Why is it no longer Shia? The answer is disassociation, not taqiyya. You see, when you take taqiyya, again, as I said, don't get me wrong, taqiyya is obligatory, taqiyya is part of our religion, taqiyya must be practiced. There are times when it becomes optional when it's your own life, but if it involves other people, it must be practiced. All these things I just talked about. However, when you take taqiyya to an extreme, it leads to disassociation and bara'ah. How? You see somebody who lives in so-and-so country. No need to mention names. And you're like, do you go to Husainiyat in that country? They're like, no. Because it's not a Shia country. They've put a lot of restrictions on us. They don't let us hold majalis in our homes. They don't allow us to open Husainiyat. They don't permit us to have any public majalis of any kind. If we hold private majalis, then we have fear that there might actually be repercussions for that. I might get fired. I might get thrown out of the country. My work permit might be canceled. My residency might be revoked. And so you're like, okay, so you live in that country and you've been there for how long now? 5 years, 10 years? Not a single majlis. They're like, no, we can't because, taqiyya and all. And then you're like, okay, well, what about your kids? And they say, well, the kids, they live with us and they're good people. We try and do a good enough job to raise them. Okay, what have you named your kids? But we can't name them Hassan, Husain, Ali, Fatima. And so we've given them neutral names, right? We call them, again, I don't want to mention names because we might call them Khalid. We might call them names of the Sahaba. And they'll look for that weird name that some Imam's sister was named, right? And they're like, yeah, we're going to go with that. Because if it's like too Shia, then we're going to have issues. The kids at school, they might ask them questions. So you see what's happening here. No access to religious education. Oh, we got YouTube. As if YouTube's going to establish your religion for you. We've delegated and outsourced the discipline, the child rearing, the upbringing of our children, the next generation to YouTube? What an abysmal state is it that we're in when YouTube is what we refer to when we're trying to gain religious knowledge, with all the trash and the poison and the garbage that's in it. Even the religious stuff is poisoned, let alone the non-religious stuff. Yeah, we have YouTube. And so what happens is day after day after day, year after year after year, in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years, you might still be a Shia, but certainly not your kids. This is called taking taqiyya to an extreme where it becomes bara'ah. This is disassociation from the Ahlul Bayt. This is like Ali ibn Abi Talib not playing any role in your life whatsoever. Except that, yeah, we love him. During the celebrations and commemorations, there's nothing happening. These kids have no clue. Wallahi, brothers and sisters, we can never be thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the chance to be able to attend these majalis. Let's ask Allah tonight in the name of Abil Fadl al-Abbas that He never takes this gift from us, this honor that we've been bestowed. Because those who are deprived of these majalis, of these gatherings, they are the ones who realize just what a big, gigantic hole there is in their hearts. There is spirituality here, with every single one of you luminous faces getting together in honor and remembrance of Imam al-Husain. You charge the atmosphere. The angels, they add to that aura. I'll mention this even though I didn't plan on saying it, but I attended a gathering at a particular university in the United States, and It was right after Ashura, so we had a meeting with all the university students who went to that university, and they were talking about their experience in Muharram. And so there were a few people who came from a particular ethnicity, I won't mention it. And there were mostly women for some reason, maybe one or two men as well, who all complained about the majalis. They all said, yeah, we went to these majalis, but the speakers, they can't connect with the youth. And they were a little too aggressive and too emotional, and like we don't even know why we're crying, and it was in a different language. Our language is English, their language is something else, and yeah, we kind of understand what they say because they were from the same ethnicity, the same community. But we'd rather have English lectures as opposed to those lectures in that language. And so they all complained, one after the other. Again, it was like a meeting to sort of get to know what they went through, their experiences in Muharram. So they all finished talking, criticizing the majalis. Then this Lebanese sister got up and she said, the closest majlis to my house is one where this language is spoken. I don't speak a single word of this particular language. It's completely foreign to me. And yet, every night, myself, my husband, and my 9-month-old child, we went to the majlis. Because even though I don't understand a single word that the speaker is saying, or that the eulogizer is saying, I went there for the atmosphere. I went there because the walls and the ceilings, they all cried out, Ya Husain. To me, that's as close as I can get. Because the next majlis where they do speak Arabic or English was too far from me. And so that was the only option, but I went there anyway. May Allah never deprive us of this privilege. Now, the people who live in these countries, in their minds, countries where the Shia are persecuted and they're a minority, in their minds they're like, yeah, it is what it is. I have to practice taqiyya. At the end of the day, my business is here. My job is here. And little by little, what they don't know is that atmosphere, where it lacks the remembrance of Imam al-Husain, and a connection, a direct and clear connection to Amir al-Mu'mineen and the Ahlul Bayt and the Imam of the time, it chips away at their soul, at their beliefs. And when the next generation comes, it's all gone. I said to somebody who lived in a country which banned hijab, I said, what the hell are you doing here? I'm not saying that if you have absolutely nowhere else to go, then you should just jump into the sea. But if you have the option of moving, migrating to another country, go! Save your religion, save your faith. This is no longer about taqiyya, this is disassociation. This is you showing ambivalence towards your values and your principles and the rules of your religion. This is you showing indifference. You don't care enough about it. You care more about your business and about your job. Again, I'm sorry, I don't want to mention examples that would make some people uncomfortable. But when I compromise on my religion by giving a weird neutral name to my child, just so this child wouldn't be bullied at school or wouldn't have any issues getting a job down the line, that compromise begets another compromise. That compromise reflects and is expressive of a mentality. The mentality of compromise is never confined to one thing. I will compromise on other things. And again, with time, the impact of that will become clear. When you live in a free country like this, take every advantage of every right that's been given to you. You have the right to choose the names of the Ahlul Bayt for your children. Take advantage of it. You have the right to use combination names where people can tell that your son is a Shia a mile away. Take advantage of it. You have the right to pray wherever you want. Take advantage of it. Even if you can pray in the office in some corner room, Pray out there in public in the park. Take advantage of it. Be as visible as you can. Be proud of your faith. Be proud of your religion, your values, your leaders, your imams. I remember years ago somebody came to me and said, my daughter is finishing high school this year. She wants to go to university next year. And now she feels really uncomfortable because it's university and there's a lot of pressure. Obviously she's growing older as well. And she wants to throw the hijab away. Should she do that? Or should she not go to university? Should I, as a father, pressure her to not go to university? I said, look, I'm not going to be someone who encourages her to go to university, because God knows what's going to happen there, especially if she's not married. And the same thing applies to men as well. My suggestion to people is always get married, then go to university. At least try and immunize yourself from all the filth that you're going to face in there, right? Do what everybody else is doing. I mean, come on, everybody has a boyfriend or a girlfriend at university. You're the only one who suddenly can't make it work? You're the only person who can't study and can't focus if you have a life partner, someone who supports you, someone who cares for you, someone who cherishes you? Suddenly you're the only person? Everybody goes through the turmoil, the ups and downs of breakups and relationships. You're the only one who can't handle the pressure? Come on, give me a break. But I'm not going to tell you to not send her to university. Instead, I will tell her to go to university wearing her hijab and being proud of it. Wallahi, brothers and sisters, we're living in an age where values are upside down, where the most sinful act is a source of pride for some people. And my hijab is a source of shame. My beard is a source of shame. My salat, my remembrance of Imam al-Husain is a source of shame. Why? It shows that weakness inside of us, which we talked about last night. Be proud. Cherish and honor these values that came to us on the back of rivers of blood. Not just that of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, but their companions and their followers. Over 1,000 years of massacre after massacre, carnage after carnage. That's why we're Shia. And now we're ashamed of it. Let's not take taqiyya to an extreme where it becomes disassociation. That's one example. And again, there are many, many others where if you look hard enough, you'll see compromises being made. And Imam al-Husain alayhi salam and his limbs and his blood becomes the price we pay. We compromise on the joints of Abu Abdullah al-Husain so that I could live just a little bit more comfortably. Let's not be one of those people. كأني بأوصالي يتقطعها عسلان الفلوات بين النواويس وكربلاء. And they fill their stomachs. How do they fill their stomachs? Why does the Imam describe some people as benefiting from eating my body? Let me give you a couple of examples here as well. Abu Basir comes to Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. He says to him, Ya ibn Rasulullah, the companions of Amir al-Mu'mineen, they were told by their Imam Ali alayhi salam, ilm al-manaya wal-balaya. Metham al-Tamar was one of these people. The Imam would tell him when he's going to die, where he's going to die, how he's going to die, and under what circumstances. When Metham al-Tamar was threatened by Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad that he would be executed, he said to him, I know exactly what you're going to do because my Imam has already told me that. He even said, I'm not going to get killed now because my Imam said to me that the disk of the sun will be half covered by the horizon. And so it's too soon now. It'll be in half an hour's time, for instance. So Amir al-Mu'mineen told Metham al-Tamar, Hujr ibn Adi, and others, all of these details about their death. Abu Basir says to Imam al-Sadiq, why don't you teach us the same things? You have the same knowledge of Amir al-Mu'mineen. You are the heir, the inheritor of the knowledge of Ali ibn Abi Talib. So why don't you tell us these things? So that we can be prepared for our death. So he has a very legitimate reason as well. It's not just because it's interesting to know when I'm going to die. No, I want to get ready. Do you know what the Imam said to him? The Imam said to him, the difference between you lot and the companions of Ali ibn Abi Talib is that they had a lock on their mouths. What does that mean? We have a whole category of ahadith. Again, this is connected to the discussion on Taqiyya. We have a category of ahadith. This is in Sahih al-Kafi, in Usul al-Kafi, the blessed book of al-Kafi, and others, which talk about how we should not be إذاعة مذيعين لا تذيعوا, right? مذياع. The meaning of مذياع is nowadays I guess most people can only relate with that when they're in their car. It's a radio. A transistor radio in Arabic is called مذياع. The Imams have told us to not be مذياع. Why? Because مذياع is something that broadcasts sound. And our Imams have told us that you shouldn't broadcast everything irrespective of who's listening. Meaning, keep a secret. Learn to keep our secrets. Don't say anything to just about anybody. And we have so many ahadith from the Ahlul Bayt about this subject. Why? Let me give you a couple of examples. Sahifa Sajjadiya, you're all familiar with it. Alhamdulillah. Try and read, even if it's just a couple of lines a day from Sahifa Sajjadiya. The book is attributed to who? Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam, hence the name. If you read, and I encourage you to do this if you can, when you go back home tonight, read the introduction to Sahifa Sajjadiya, which is really the story behind how we got a hold of the Sahifa. In other words, it's the isnad of the Sahifa. It's the chain of transmission. How did we access the Sahifa? In a nutshell, I'll just mention one portion of it. The story goes something like this. A man by the name of Mutawakkil ibn Harun, a companion of Imam al-Sadiq, he says that I met Yahya ibn Zayd. Who was Yahya ibn Zayd? Is another story for another time. But Yahya ibn Zayd ibn Ali ibn al-Husain ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib. Meaning he's the grandson of Imam al-Sajjad. He's the son of Zayd. Who was Zayd? Zayd was the revolutionary who rose against the Umayyad dynasty, but was eventually killed and crucified, was martyred. So, Mutawakkil ibn Harun says that I met Yahya ibn Zayd on his way to Khurasan. This is after Zayd had been killed. His son Yahya, whose shrine is actually on the outskirts of Mashhad. If you ever go to Mashhad, try and visit his shrine. He says, I met him along the way. I said to him, where are you headed? He said, I'm headed towards Khurasan. He said, where have you come from? Yahya asked Mutawakkil ibn Harun. He said, where have you come from? He said, I just came from Mecca. He said, did you meet my cousins? Meaning Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, because they were cousins, right? He's the grandson of Imam al-Sajjad. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam is also the grandson from Imam Ali ibn al-Husayn. Imam al-Baqir, the son of Imam al-Sajjad. So he says, did you meet my cousin in Mecca? He said, yes, I did meet him. He said, how is he? He said, he's well, meaning Imam al-Sadiq is well. Yahya said, did he tell you anything about me? He said, yes, he did, but I'd rather not tell you. He said, look, tell me. I want to know. If there is a bad omen, if there is something bad about to happen to me, I'm not afraid of death. It's okay, you can talk to me. He said, well, your cousin Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam said that Yahya ibn Zayd will go to Khurasan and he will be killed and he will be crucified just like his father was. In other words, the Imam has foretold your future. Yahya ibn Zayd قال إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. Yes, the Imam knows what's going to happen to me. And if he said, I'm going to get killed, because the intention wasn't to be killed, the intention was to go and overthrow the regime. But if he said that this is going to happen to me, then it's going to happen to me. Now that I know I'm going to die, Yahya ibn Zayd said, I want to give you a secret that I want you to deliver to my cousins in Mecca. He said, what's that? He said, it's a book of du'as and supplications. This is a reference to what? To Sahifa Sajjadiya. Listen carefully. I want to give you this book, and I want you to promise that you're going to preserve it, protect it, and keep it as a secret until you hand it over to my cousins. So then, Mutawakkil, he took the book and went back, gave it to Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, and at that point, Yahya ibn Zayd had already been martyred. Here's a question to all of you. Why is Sahifa Sajjadiya a secret? Think about it. It's a book of supplications. It's a book of du'as. Why should that be preserved and protected and not shown or exposed to others? Well, there are many reasons for that, especially at the time. In the context of the time of Yahya ibn Zayd, this mattered. As-Sahifa Sajjadiya is a book of supplications. There is nothing controversial in it. There is nobody being cursed in it. So why should it be protected? Number one, because there was a fear that if the Umayyads got a hold of it, they would destroy it and we would never receive it. Number one. Number two, because they might attribute the beautiful gems of supplications and du'as in this book to Muawiyah and Yazid ibn Muawiyah. In other words, intellectual theft, the stealing of intellectual property, which is something that was done to the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam in the most shocking manner. So many of the words of Amir al-Mu'mineen have been attributed to every Tom, Dick and Harry. To people like Hasan al-Basri, to Muawiyah. Sometimes they'd say, some Bedouin said such and such. And it's one of the most incredible words of wisdom by Amir al-Mu'mineen. But just so they don't mention his name, they say, a Bedouin said such and such. So the intellectual property rights of the Ahlul Bayt were always violated. The Imams, Yahya ibn Zayd in this particular instance, didn't want this book to be attributed to this and that. So it had to be protected now. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time. There's so much to talk about this very specific subject. Because you might think to yourself, what's that got to do with me? What's the relevance to my life? Well, the relevance is this. The teachings of the Ahlul Bayt, brothers and sisters, are not a commodity for me to buy and sell. The flesh and blood and bones of Abu Abdullah al-Husain is not something for me to gain personally from at the expense of the Imams alayhimus salam. It should be the other way around. I should throw myself under the bus if the honor and the name and the reputation of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam is at stake. Ammar al-Duhani's story is famous. Somebody came to Imam al-Sadiq. He said to him, Yabna Rasulullah, today I was in court. And Ammar al-Duhani, who was one of the followers of the Ahlul Bayt, he came before a judge known as Ibn Abi Layla, who was a Nasibi. He's a judge that worked as part of the Umayyad regime. So the judge says to Ammar al-Duhani, he said, you know what? You seem like a good man, but your testimony cannot be accepted in my court. He said, why? He said, because you're a Rafidi. You're a Shia. So your testimony can't be accepted. It holds no value. Ammar al-Duhani broke down in tears, who was called a Rafidi. He started crying. So Ibn Abi Layla said to him, look, no hard feelings, man. It's okay. If you become one of us, your testimony will be accepted. Why are you crying? He said, you fool, you imbecile. I'm not crying because you've insulted me, because you called me a Rafidi. I'm crying because for the first time in my life, I thought to myself, hang on a second. People actually see me as a Shia? People attribute me to Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam. And all of my sins, all of my shortcomings, all of my flaws, all of my crimes, all of the hideous, heinous things that I do, they're also attributed to the Shia of the Ahlul Bayt. People see me with all of the problems that I bring to the table and they call me a Rafidi. The reputation of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam is being damaged by me. That's why I'm crying. Who am I to be a Rafidi? Why would you call me a Rafidi? This is an honor that's bestowed to the sorcerers of Fir'aun who repented and were killed for their allegiance to Musa, for believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They were the first to be called Rafidis. Who am I to be a Rafidi? But nowadays, it's a hashtag, it's a tattoo, right? It's just a slogan, Rafidi, Rafidi. Ammar al-Duhani breaks down in tears. When this news reached Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, the Imam said, if Ammar had committed every sin under the sun, Allah will forgive his sins simply for saying this. In other words, simply for disassociating himself from us, protecting our reputation, our honor, our name. Allah will forgive every single one of his sins for that. And yet, look at us. The people who talk, who mention the hadiths of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam just for clickbait. Merits and virtues of Amir al-Mu'mineen and the Ahlul Bayt that he himself has no clue what they mean, right? But he'll say it just so he gets a little bit of notoriety, a little bit of recognition, so that people cheer and clap and recite the salawat, so that people say, oh mashallah, how much he understands, how much he knows, how much he's memorized. Clickbait, that's all it is. Majalis, lectures, things that are said on this sacred mimbar, which is turned into a'wad, as Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. Remember? On the one hand, look at the compromise. Look at how they take advantage of this sacred institution. On the other hand, look at how Imam Sajjad alayhi salam says, you've devalued this institution. When that speaker gets up in the presence of Yazid and he cursed Amir al-Mu'mineen and Imam al-Hasan and Imam al-Husain and praised Yazid and Muawiyah, what did the Imam say to him? فَصَاحَ بِهِ عَلِيُّ ibn al-Husayn. The Imam screamed in the presence of this tyrant Fir'aun, Yazid ibn Muawiyah. He said, وَيْلَكَ أَيُّهَا الْخَاطِبِ. Woe unto you, you speaker. اشتريت سخط الخالق برضا المخلوق. You've just entered into a transaction, right? Where you have purchased the wrath of God, the Creator, in exchange for what? For the happiness of the creature? To make Yazid happy with you? Look what you've done. You've angered Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then the Imam said to him, فَتَبَوَّأْ مَقْعَدَكَ مِنَ النَّارِ. You can go ahead and pick your seat in the fires of hell right now. You're done. Then the Imam said to Yazid, he said, إِذَنْ لِي أَنْ أَصْعَدَ هَذِهِ الْأَعْوَادِ. Give me permission to get up on these pieces of wood. He doesn't call them a mimbar. Pieces of wood, chunks of wood that you put together. Because a mimbar is a sacred institution. A mimbar is a place that only qualified scholars get to sit on. Or at least people who know what they're talking about. At least people who know what to say and what not to say. Imagine, you've all been to dentists, I imagine, or you've seen a dentist's office at some point. Have you seen their tools? Have you seen when they pull that table and you can see all of these different instruments that they have? Imagine you watching, or me, watching a couple of YouTube videos and maybe reading a couple of manuals on how a tooth is taken out, for instance, or cleaned, right? Now you go to that instrument table. Do you have a clue what you're supposed to do? Do you know what instrument to pick, what not to pick? When you're looking at the dentist doing his work, you're like, he's just picking random instruments here. Because we're not experts. Why is it that when it comes to religion, any random person gets to express their views and talk about religious topics. Why? Where have we gone? As a community, what are we doing? You as a community, you as audience members should be better. You should scrutinize. You should ask, where did this person study? Who are his teachers? Which institution did he enroll in? Who gave him permission to sit on the pulpit? Where did this person come from? Just because he happens to be famous doesn't make him qualified. Because how can we tell the difference between a scholar and an actor? An actor can play the role of a scholar better than the scholar himself. That's what they do. زُخْرُفَ الْقَوْلِ غُرُورًا, as the Quran says. That's what they're good at. Falsehood is best at manipulating you and deceiving you and fooling you. And you might think, oh no, I know, I can tell the difference. But you don't. Because you don't have the criteria by which to measure these individuals. But at the very least, which hawza did they go to? If they went to university, that's not good enough. Because it's like someone saying, I became a dentist by going to the hawza. The hawza teaches one thing, university teaches something entirely different. You're not going to learn قال الباقر قال الصادق. You're not going to learn about your religion from a university. You're going to learn how well to criticize religion, how to manipulate religion, how to analyze religion, but not religion itself. Where did he study? Where did he go? Where is his garb? Does he actually practice what he preaches? Or is he all over the place and somehow we compartmentalize? No, it's okay. I know he's got issues there, but it's interesting. Where are we? Where are we headed? We've turned this into chunks of wood. Rasulullah says to Salman, he says there is going to be a day when children sit on pulpits. يَصْعَدُ الصَّبْيَانُ الْمَنَابِرِ. Children, not so much in terms of their age, but in terms of their knowledge, their qualification. Right? Let's not compromise on religion. Let's not sell our religion too cheap, brothers and sisters. Let's ensure that our religion is always front and center, that it's the top priority, that we never lose connection to it, because that's how they work, that's how they operate. They came to Shurayh al-Qadi and they told him, we're about to go to war with al-Husain ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib, and we want you to do one thing. We want you to come up with a religious justification from the very belly of Islam that justifies the killing of Husain. So that tomorrow on the day of Ashura, Umar ibn Sa'd calls out, أَلَا يَا خَيْلَ اللَّهِ ارْكَبِي وَبِالْجَنَّةِ أَبْشِرِي. He says, riders of Allah, now you can head into the battle because you've been given glad tidings of paradise. Umar ibn Sa'd is saying this to his horsemen. But in order for us to say this, we need Shurayh to sign off on it. We need someone wearing a religious garb or having a religious title or holding a religious office to validate what we're about to do. A lot of us are like that. We need someone even remotely connected to religion. Just give me that validation. Give me that approval so I can do whatever I want in the name of religion. These so-called Muslim intellectuals today, these academics, that's exactly what they do. What they do is they look at the world around them. They find out what's trending, right? Whatever happens to be trending. Whatever they're talking about at the United Nations. Whatever they're talking about at the level of these human rights organizations, right? They look at them and they're focusing on like that one thing in Islam, and they'll be like, leave it to me. I'll give you all the justification from the very core of religion to explain to you how it's not what you think. To completely manipulate God's law. And they'll be like, okay, hijab. Yes, hijab is a problem. Hijab is a challenge. So, hijab, come on, it's not what you think. Hijab was actually meant to protect the women. It was meant to make them anonymous, to hide their identity. so that no harm would come to them. And so today, if a woman wears hijab, the opposite happens. She'll be singled out. She'll stand out like a sore thumb. And she might even be hurt, right? So hijab really is about modesty in the heart. You have to dig deep down and pull out your inner Buddha and sort of that be in the Zen mode. And that's really what hijab is all about. It's not something you wear, because you can wear whatever you want and be whatever you want. Really, it's about the cleanliness of the heart. And they'll cite verses from the Quran. Never mind all the verses that specifically mention the word hijab, jilbab, all these things, actual articles of clothing. But they'll say, look, Quran was revealed for another time. This whole thing about females having half the inheritance, this was contextual, dude. It was about a different time when women weren't as independent. They had the protection of the state, and now it's a whole different world. Under the pretext of the times being changed, they will destroy Islam. The times are different now. Never mind halalu Muhammadin halalun ila yawm al-qiyamah wa haramu Muhammadin haramun ila yawm al-qiyamah. Never mind that these are laws that don't change. These are actual verses of the Quran. But they'll come up with a justification. Like that fool who came out and said that the Quran is the beginning, it's not the end. And at first when you hear it, you're like, wow, the Quran is the beginning. But what they're actually trying to say is, the Quran is what we use to reform society. Now there were things the Prophet couldn't reform, so he just left it. Now we can reform them. Wow, now we can scrap all of that. Because it's all about reform. It's all about reform. Brothers and sisters, when you hear the word reform, run in the opposite direction. Run. Because in the name of reform, they want to snatch away your faith. They will not stop until they destroy Islam altogether. They will throw Imam Husain's body to the wolves. Because to them, it's about appeasing others. It's about what others say. It's about my non-Muslim colleagues at work and whether they're happy with my beliefs and my practices. Again, that utter weakness that we talked about last night is exemplified in these individuals. Na'udhu billah. Na'udhu billah. And then there are those who use Imam al-Husain to make a quick buck. I mean, that's gotta be really the worst of the worst. So I can make a little bit of money? Sure, it's not wrong to be given an honorarium, to be honored and given a gift or something in exchange for your services. There's nothing wrong with that. But when it becomes a prerequisite, when it becomes a precondition, when it becomes a dollar figure, right? When it becomes, I won't do this unless I get paid that much, and it's a contract and have to be signed and sent, and lawyers checking them and stuff like that. Well, not lawyers. Usually it's his wife or his brother or his cousin. When it becomes about that, you know there's something deeply wrong with this. And again, we can all get it. Doesn't need a rocket scientist. Isa alayhi salam says to the disciples, he says, listen to me. Ad-dinaru da'ud-din. Put so beautifully as well. He says, money, gold, is the disease of religion. وَالْعَالِمُ دَوَاءُ الدِّينِ. And a scholar is the one who heals religion, fixes it if there is any flaws. فَإِذَا رَأَيْتُمُ. If you ever see the scholar who is the healer, the physician, pulling the disease towards himself, فَاتَّهِمُوهُ. Then you can accuse him. In other words, don't give him the benefit of the doubt. Don't say, oh, maybe this, that. No, no, no. When you see this person's all about money, all about making a quick buck, then you know there's something wrong. And then the Imam says, he will never be able to benefit anybody else if he's like that himself. So let's scrutinize, let's ensure we don't fall into this trap of people using the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt to their advantage. Don't compromise. Not on religion. Compromise on everything in your life, just not on religion. Look at Abil Fadl al-Abbas. Perhaps the most famous slogan on the day of Ashura is this. When they severed his right hand, بأبي هو وأمي, what did he say? He said, Wallahi in qata'tumu yamini. If you haven't already memorized it, memorize it. Wallahi, by God, in qata'tumu yamini inni uhami abadan an. Say it with me. Dini. You can cut my limbs off. I will forever, abadan an dini. I will forever defend my religion. I will never compromise on my faith. وعن إمام صادق اليقين. And I will continue to defend my master Husain, his own brother. He calls him Imam, my master, my leader. وعن إمام صادق اليقين نجل النبي Mustafa al-Amini. He's the grandson of Rasulullah. You can do whatever you want with me. Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا أَبُو الْفَضْلِ الْعَبَّاسِ. He's the one referred to by Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. So many things have been said about the Imam. But perhaps the most indicative of the rank of Abbas is what his own brother Imam al-Husayn said on the day of Ashura. When he sent him to go and speak to the enemy camp, the Imam said to him, Irkab binafsi ant. May my soul be ransomed for you, O Abbas. I want to see you on the back of your horse. I want to see you in your full glory. I want you to ride on your horse and go to them and speak to them. Binafsi ant, Imam al-Husayn says about Abbas. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. So much to say. On the day of Ashura, he came to Abu Abdullah al-Husayn. Before that, he asked his brothers to head into the battlefield. He said to them, Binafsi antum, may I be ransomed for you. Go, I wish to see you die for Husayn. I wish to see you fulfill your destiny, because we all know why our mother raised us. She raised us so that we could honor her on this day, so that we could do what she wanted us to do on this day. Go and fight. I wish to see you die for Abu Abdullah al-Husayn. Then he came to his brother. He said, Sayyidi ya Abu Abdullah, my master. He never called him brother. Not once, until the very end. He said, Sayyidi, Mawlai, Ya Aba Abdullah, Ya ibn Rasulullah, لَقَدْ ضَاقَ صَدْرِي مِنْ هَؤُلَاءِ الْقَوْمِ. He said, I can't handle, I've had enough. I can't see children bringing water vessels that are empty. I can no longer hear the cries of the women and children saying, Al-Atash, Al-Atash, Al-Atash. Allahu Akbar. فَأَذَنْ لِي بِالْقِتَالِ. Give me permission to go and fight. What did Imam al-Husayn say to him? He said, Akhi. He always called him brother. My little brother Abbas. Akhi, أنت كبش كتيبتي. أنت حامل لوائي. You are my standard bearer. You are the leader of my army. At that point, there was no longer an army. Abbas was a one-man army. When Imam al-Husayn was speaking to Abbas, everyone had already been killed. Not a single person remained. The Imam is telling him, even though it's only you, but if you go, I will no longer have an army. What's going to happen to the women and the children? They're all looking up to you. They're all thinking, as long as Uncle Abbas is alive, our father is safe. As long as Abbas is here, he's going to bring us some water back to the camp. If you go, what will I do? If you die, my enemy will rejoice. If you're killed, my entire camp will be dismantled. Abul Fadl al-Abbas insisted. He said, let me go. I have to fight. I want to defend you. I want to protect you. Eventually, Imam al-Husain gave him permission. But how did he give him permission? He said, إن كان ولا بد فاطلب لهؤلاء الأطفال شربة من الماء. If you must go, my brother, then go and bring water back to the camp. Bring water to these thirsty children. Abbas heads into the battlefield. لا أرهب الموت إذا الموت رقايا. نفسي لنفس المصطفى الطهر وقاء. I do not fear death when it comes to me. My soul is ransomed for the soul of Rasulullah, meaning Aba Abdullah al-Husain. لا أرهب الموت إذا الموت رقى. نفسي لنفس المصطفى الطهر وقاء. إني أنا العباس أغدو بالسقاء. He introduces himself. He reminds them that he is Abbas, the son of Amir al-Mu'mineen. But he said, I am not here to fight you. I'm only here to bring water back to the camp. He heads towards the river Euphrates. 4,000 archers intercept his way. He forces them all to flee from him. It is Abbas we're talking about. They all run away from him. He makes it to the water. Allahu Akbar. He stretches his hand into the stream. Some say, if Abbas quenches his thirst, we will all be killed. If Abbas is rejuvenated, he will destroy all of us. They're all watching, observing, waiting to see what he does. Suddenly they see him throwing the water back into the stream, walking out and saying, Ya nafsu min ba'd al-Husain huni وبعده ما كنت أو تكوني. هذا حسين وارد المنون وتشربين بارد المعين. O self, you're about to drink from this cool water when Husain is still thirsty, when Ruqayya is thirsty, when Sakina is thirsty. He throws the water out of his hand. He fills the canteen, he fills the container with water and heads back into the direction of the camp of Imam al-Husain. أجركم الله يا مؤمنون. They say, ensure he doesn't take the water back. If Husain's thirst is quenched, he will destroy us. Abbas heads back. They all surround him. They throw arrows and spears in his direction. رحم الله من نادى وعباسا وغريبا وسيدا. One man here approaches him and cuts off his right hand. Another one cuts off his left hand. At this point, Abbas has one mission: to take the water back to Aba Abdullah. Here they start shooting arrows at him. The arrows descend on him like rain. فوقع سهم في القربة. One arrow pierced through the container, spilling the water. ووقع سهم على صدره. Another one pierced his chest. ووقع سهم في عينه. Another one entered his eye. Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas stopped. He has no hand to fight with, no eye to see with, no water to take back to the camp. فوقف العباس متحيرا. He didn't know what to do. Some have said he tried to pull the arrow out of his eye. He lowered his head to hold the arrow with his knees. That's when the helmet fell down. فجاءه لعين بعمد من حديد. A man carrying an iron pole came from behind. فضرب العباس على عمد الحديد بكربلاء فلق القمر. Abbas had nothing now. He fell from the back of the horse for the first time, calling أخي أدرك أخاك. Brother Husain, come to me. Imam al-Husain rushed to his brother Abbas. They ran away from him like a flock of goats running from a raging lion. Imam al-Husain would scream, إلى أين تفرون وقد قتلتم أخي? Where do you flee when you've killed my brother? Until he reached his brother Abbas. Abu Abdullah came close to him. He cried out, أخي الآن انكسر ظهري. My brother Abbas, my back is now broken. وقلت حيلتي وشمت بي عدوي. What does this last line mean? The Imam said, my enemy has rejoiced now, because they gathered around Husain and Abbas, clapping and cheering, saying, لقد قتلنا العباس. لقد قتلنا العباس. Abu Abdullah sat next to his brother Abbas. Abu al-Fadl didn't know who he was. He thought it was an enemy soldier trying to kill him. He said to him, أسألك بمن تعبد. I ask you and whoever you worship to spare me until my brother comes to me so I can bid him farewell. He said, أخي أبا الفضل أنا أخوك الحسين. This is me, Husain Abbas. This is me, my little brother Abbas. Imam Husain sat next to him. He tried to pull his brother's head and put it in his lap. They say Abbas would pull his head and put it back on the dirt. Imam Husain said, why are you doing this? He said, because now you're with me and you put my head in your lap. But who's going to hold your head when you're dying? Imam Husain left his brother Abbas and went back to the camp. They say that when he reached the camp, everyone came out. Where is Abbas? Where is my uncle? Where is my brother? You know, you all know that when Ali al-Akbar was about to head into the battlefield, all the women gathered around. They all bid him farewell, but no one bid Abbas farewell. Do you know why? Because everyone said, Abbas, if he promised to bring back water, he's definitely coming back. No one expected Abbas to go and never come back. when Imam Husain came back all alone, Zainab came out. Ya Aba Abdullah, Aina Akhi al-Abbas. Imam Husain didn't say a word. He cried while wiping his tears with his sleeve. He simply went to the tent of Abbas. He removed the pillar and the tent fell to the ground. Zainab knew what had happened. She said, Wa Abbasa, wa dayatana ba'dak. We're lost after you. Imam Husain also repeated, Wa dayatana ba'dak. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون والعاقبة للمتقين. اللهم إنا نسألك وندعوك بحق أبي الفضل العباس قمر العشيرة ساقي العطاشة، بحق يديه المقطوعتين، بحق عينه التي نبت السهم فيها، نسألك بحق أبي الفضل العباس أن تعجل فرج إمام زماننا يا الله يا الله يا الله يا الله. يا الله يا الله يا الله يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم عجل لوليك الفرج والعافية والنصر. اجعلنا من أصحابه وأنصاره والمستشهدين بين يديه. اللهم ارزقنا في الدنيا زيارة الحسين وفي الآخرة شفاعة الحسين. اللهم وارحم موتانا، ثبتنا على ولاية أمير المؤمنين، أحينا حياة محمد وآل محمد، وأمتنا ممات محمد وآل محمد. اللهم وارحم الماضين منا ومن شيعة أمير المؤمنين والعلماء